So two people heard that. Good morning, everybody. Very good. Thank you for joining us this year. Again, we're excited about having a packed house for a really important topical discussion regarding housing here in Gaston County. I'm Patrick Mumford with Gaston Business Association, and I'm thrilled that you're able to join us this morning. I do want to make sure that I start by thanking our partners, the Gaston Association of Realtors and the Home Builders Association of Greater Charlotte. They are tremendous partners of the Gaston Business Association in pulling together this great audience, as well as putting together a program that includes Dr. Yoon, again, coming to visit us. He's a rock star in this space. My wife is a mortgage banker, and I said, oh yeah, we've got a guy named Dr. Yoon. Oh yeah, I know him. I listen to his podcast, and so you're well known throughout the industry. I also want to acknowledge Paramount Health as the event sponsor. Thank you all for continuously supporting our ability to help educate the community on these really important issues. Appreciate that. And now I would like to ask Cassandra Snyder to come up, and she will do an introduction to Dr. Human, a bit more than I did. Cassandra.
Good morning. Welcome. Thank you all for coming today. My name is Cassandra Snyder, and it occurred to me over the weekend that today, March 10th in 2010, was the first day I got into real estate. I got a phone call from the real estate agent that helped me buy my house, and she said, hey, Jen, for those of you who know who that was, she was a force to be reckoned with. So I didn't dare say no. But this has led to the path that I am on today. I never would have seen this chapter coming. This morning, today, I am a realtor. I am the broker owner of Blue Real Estate Group, and in that capacity, I'm the recycled president-elect for the Gaston Association of Realtors. I am also a licensed general contractor, and in that capacity, I hold a license for Marley Homes Construction, and I represent the Gaston chapter of the Home Builders Association of Greater Charlotte. I've been told that's a death do us part position, so find somebody else if you need. And based on the anniversary card I got from the Gaston Business Association, I've been an investor with them for 8 years. Holy cow. My favorite position that I hold, though, is being grandma. I have 5 amazing grandkids, one overachiever son that has to live with all of them, but because of all these roles, I want you to understand that I wasn't born here. My accent doesn't give that away. I was not born here, but I'm very much invested in what happens in Gaston County, so that makes these events very important to me, because the conversations that we have in this room and outside make a difference to all of us. So, you've heard that. So, hang on 1 second. I need to do a wardrobe modification. I wrote on the back of the front.
Oh, love it. Yay,
So, a little bit of a fangirl here, so just understand. But it is my extreme pleasure to announce our mainline speaker today, Dr. Lawrence Yoon. He's the chief economist with the National Association of Realtors. He's been there since the year 2000 and was made chief economist in 2007. Dr. Yoon oversees the production of the existing home sales statistics, the home buyer, home seller survey reports, and I can tell you, being put in that position in 2007, most of you in this room know that wasn't lesson for still being here with us. So, as a fangirl, I love listening to Dr. Yoon. I get to, any chance I get to, I love to listen to the way he delivers what can be a depressing, boring topic. I mean, the economy, we don't really want to listen to that. But I feel Dr. Yoon presents it in a way that's easy to understand. I walk out pretty much uplifted. He's entertaining. Your sense of humor. First time I heard him, I said, let me see. Cool. Okay. So, sorry, but Dr. Yoon, welcome to Gaston County. Please join us here on stage.
Great. Happy to join you all. I was also not born here. In fact, I was born in a foreign country, South Korea, and my parents immigrated to the country many years ago. And as I look back, it's exactly 50 years ago because we settled in Columbia, South Carolina. And I remember the 200th year the United States celebration condition, and of course this year is 250, so automatically 50 years here. I had to wake up early knowing that there will be traffic jam in the Charlotte region, so I made it here on time. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you, President-elect Cassandra. Thank you, President Randy, who is sitting on the front table, because I always value the leadership of the local association, because they tell us what needs to happen, how we could move the market. I started in my current position when the foreclosure crisis was just beginning to happen. And through the leadership of the state local association, all the relaying of the information to NAR at that time, we pushed for homebuyer tax credit to say everything is bleeding, economy is going under, what can we do to stop the bleeding? And if people don't have confidence to get into the housing market, then that will continue to lead the real estate along with the economy. So the homebuyer tax credit, if people remember back in 2010 roughly period, $8,000 on the table. Buy a home and you get an $8,000. And what do you know? That quickly changed the confidence that led to the housing beginning to recover along with the economy. This time, we are in a different situation. So we are advocating for a little different issue, which I will go into. But I can say that at NAR leadership, National Association of Leadership, where there are 7-member leadership, one is from North Carolina, former state president Lisa Flemings, who is in the Raleigh region. So I get to chat with him frequently, and he definitely shares information about what's happening in the Raleigh region. But you look at the greater Charlotte region, Gastonia region, and similar condition, and consequently the #1 policy issue that we are pushing for this year, which I will go into. But let's look at the economy, real estate market, where we have been, where we are now, and where, in my best assessment, where we could possibly go into. Prediction is no guarantee, but try to apply logic from it. So if we go to the next slide. So we are in a partial government shutdown right now. I'm glad that I'm driving. I drove from Columbia to here, and I will be driving all the way to DC because I understand TSA is really a mess currently. They're not getting paid. I mean, that's really unfair. How do you expect people to work and not get paid? But we did have a longest government shutdown back in September, October of last year. And during that time, we were, as an economist, running blind because we didn't have the data on employment. We did not have data on GDP, inflation rate. We really did not know what was happening. Now, in the current partial government shutdown, there is some economic data releases. Some are delayed, but at least we're getting some information from it. So as of the moment, I know there's a lot of economic uncertainty, certainly what's happening in geopolitical events out in Iran, oil prices rising. I don't know what's happening today because it was fluctuating big time. $100 oil prices then retreated. Is it going to go back up there? What does that mean? I also remember the first year my parents came to Columbia, South Carolina. They could not go to the gas station on certain days because you have to have certain license tag, even number or odd number, to go to a gas station because of the oil price shock. Now, of course, we're not going to encounter that because we are massively producing oil here in the country currently. But oil shock can certainly derail some of the economic activity. Stock market, in the long term, it appears to be doing quite well, but there's a lot of question about whether or not it is overvalued. I know past couple of weeks it's been a little wobbly somewhat, but still at a very high level, but still a lot of question about whether it is overvalued. The real estate, record high home prices, the clients that you have served, or the investment property that you have, just has gone up, and you are getting solid return. Is it on a solid footing? And I will say it is on a solid footing, give you economic logic behind that. But the job market is clearly softening. The consumers are expressing unhappiness. Consumers are beginning to default on some borrowed money, not mortgages. Mortgages, people are paying on time for the most part. But other borrowed money, they are beginning to default. And of course, we have this big uncertainty related to the oil prices, what's gonna happen. Next slide. So if we look at the stock market, I guess this is, even accounting for the little wobble, is still very, very high. Standard & Poor's 500 index, 500 companies in the US, publicly listed, largest. But if you look at the data a little more carefully, this increase, especially in the past 3 years or so, has been driven not by 500 companies. It's driven by only 10 companies who have some artificial intelligence exposure. Somehow the Wall Street is saying, okay, let's dump money. Let's put all our financial capital into artificial intelligence condition. So 490 other companies are doing okay, fine, nothing exceptional. It is really the 10 company, the usual suspects, the Google, Amazon, the tech titans, along with some computer chip makers doing artificial intelligence. So the money is pouring there in the hopes that in the future there will be massive profit to these companies. We know that artificial intelligence you are already utilizing, and it will continue to improve. No doubt about it, technology advances. But the key question is it going to turn a huge profit in the future? If we remember in America during the horse buggy days, when the railroad suddenly came, Wall Street said, oh, what an excitement. They poured huge amount of money into the railroad sector, stock market boom, but eventually the rail fare, the charge that for the passenger you could charge, you could not charge exorbitant amount. You could only charge a modest amount to get the passengers, so they never really turned a huge profit from that, so there was a stock market crash. So, but the railroad is here. Similarly, artificial intelligence will be here, it will continue to improve, but the question is it going to turn huge profit in the future or just modest profit? And if it's only modest profit, expect some stock market adjustment from this elevated levels. Next slide. Consumers are expressing unhappiness according to this consumer sentiment index. What is remarkable about the current low level is look at the middle. Middle is 2010 condition. This is when Cassandra entered the real estate business. There were foreclosure crisis at that time. So back in 2010, we had foreclosure crisis. Those funny mortgages without income documentation, people overstretching their limit, it exploded and we had a foreclosure crisis. We had 7 million job losses in the country. Today, we don't have foreclosure crisis. We don't have job losses on net. We are not creating jobs, but we are not like 2010. Yet people are answering the question, their sentiment as if this is like a great recession. Interesting condition. Next slide. And then we begin to see some default on some borrowed money. Auto loan delinquency, 3 humps that you see. First hump, the foreclosure crisis. Second hump, COVID lockdown. Third hump, today, we are not in a great recession. We're not even in a recession, yet some people are behaving as if we are in a recession. Now, if you look at the actual figure, it is a 5% default rate. So 95% are paying on time or not being seriously delinquent. But the normal economy should be 98% of the people not being in seriously delinquent. So right now that you see the increase. Next slide. The credit card delinquency also rising. So some people are clearly feeling the economic stress out there. Now, President Trump has introduced interesting debate within the Republican Party. President Trump is saying, let's cap the credit card interest rate at 10% for 1 year. He sees this chart and he said, no, I don't want people to suffer. Let's put a 10% cap on it. while other Republicans are saying, oh, that's government interference. Government should stay out of the market system condition. So he has introduced little debate within the system. Now, only economic justification as to why one may want to put sort of interest rate cap is that the credit card industry is not perfectly competitive. It has monopoly power, or even though there are several companies, it acts like a monopoly. One company charges one interest rate, other company, they don't talk to each other. If they talk, they will go to jail. So they don't talk to each other, but they said, oh, I'm gonna follow that process. So in a sense, they have a monopoly power. So the only way to counter monopoly power is to impose some kind of government control on it. So anyway, that's an interesting debate, but clearly we see some economic distress. Next slide. The student debt default rate, for a couple of years, default rate was 0 because government said you don't have to repay, and students said, yay. So default rate typically was 0. Now they have to repay and they cannot. So you clearly see economic distress. Last year, in election, this is the midterm year election, so massive number of voting this year, but last year there was some election. New York City, well, a person who declared openly as being socialist. Now, an heir would not support. He supports rent control. He thinks property ownership is bad, and so an heir would never support Mandani, the current New York City mayor. But openly socialist candidate easily won the election by a comfortable margin. And you can attribute to that to say, well, some people are expressing unhappiness about the economy. Some people cannot repay their borrowed money, and therefore they're saying, I don't care about the label, I just want something else. So maybe this is why Mandani got elected as a New York City mayor. Now, it's very interesting that in America, we truly believe in the First Amendment, the freedom of speech, freedom of religion. In fact, James Madison wanted to be very assured on the freedom of religion to say, no, toleration of religion, that is a weak language. Stronger language is free exercise of religion. So we believe that. But it is still nonetheless a little ironic that someone who practices Muslim faith 25 years after the September 11th event is elected as the New York City mayor by easy, wide margin condition. So economic stress, essentially people are saying, look, I don't care, I want something different. We are clearly seeing some segment of society not feeling well in the current economy. Next slide. So because of the economic stress, along with the weakness in the job market, which I will show you, Federal Reserve cut interest rate 3 times last year. They did not cut interest rate in January, and they're probably not going to cut interest rate next week, to the frustration of President Trump, because President Trump believes the interest rate should be cut deeply, faster, but it's not happening. But nonetheless, direction is there in order to sort of reduce some of the economic distress that could be out there. So Federal Reserve cutting interest rates. But we all know as real estate professionals that when the Federal Reserve cuts interest rate, mortgage rate does not necessarily behave the same way. It is not a one-to-one relationship. Next slide. Because mortgage rates are impacted by many, many factors. So many Americans are focused on the first bullet point, including some of your clients. Your clients may say, oh, I heard that Federal Reserve is meeting and they are probably going to cut interest rate in June time period, so I'm going to wait until June before deciding. Well, mortgage rate, when the Federal Reserve cuts interest rate on that particular day, it may actually increase. It's not a one-to-one relationship. Because there are so many other factors that impacts mortgage rate. Things like federal budget deficit, government borrows so much money, less private capital, which means less mortgage money that's available, so a little higher interest rate condition. Supreme Court has ruled that President Trump's tariffs are unconstitutional. You need to have congressional buy-in. You need to make sure that Congress passed the bill. But one interesting part about President Trump's tariff was he was bringing in sizable revenue. In fact, in Washington language, we always use 10-year process. So over 10 years, it was anticipated to bring $3 trillion in revenue. Well, this goes away, which means that it could be a larger budget deficit. Higher inflation. The oil shock of the 1970s, why there was a gas line back in the 1970s period, was because inflation is high, and when inflation is high, no lender wants to lend money at low interest rate because the money they get back has lost in value. So they need to compensate for that. I don't think we will return to the 1970s, early 1980s when the mortgage rate went up to 18%. I don't believe that, but I'm just laying out what happened in the past from oil shock, high inflation, and then eventual high mortgage rate condition. Quantitative easing, quantitative tightening, without going into the technical discussion, sometimes outside of the interest rate policy, government can intervene to try to provide more money for the mortgage market. For example, President Trump, absolutely tired of the Federal Reserve. In fact, he has a nickname for the current chair, Jay Powell. The nickname is too late to cut interest rate, too late to, So because President Trump was so frustrated, he said, okay, bypass Federal Reserve, let's do something else to lower the interest rate, mortgage rates. And he instructed Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, essentially government-owned institution, to say, go buy government bond. So by buying government bond, it helped reduce mortgage rate on that particular day by quite measurably. Then over the weekend, there was something else that happened which brought the mortgage rate back up, specifically about Greenland, and the Europeans got upset. They sold U.S. Treasury, and that's a sort of side story. But there are some efforts outside of the Federal Reserve to actually reduce the mortgage rate. So there are many other factors involved, but the key point is mortgage rate and the Federal Reserve decision is not one-to-one relationship. Next slide. So this clearly illustrates, blue is the Federal Reserve policy. Next week they're meeting, they're not going to cut interest rate. But are they going to cut interest rate in May? May is the time when the new Fed chair, President Trump's nominated appointee, he gets to run the show, and during the interview process, I'm sure he said to President Trump, I think we need to cut interest rate. No, that's the reason why he was nominated. So I think the blue line will continue to go down. But as you can see, the red line is what you care about, 30-year fixed rate mortgage, and it does not move one-to-one. But then you step back and say, you know what? Even though it does not move one-to-one, it sort of moves similarly over a long-term period. So if the blue line declines, surely we can say this year the red line will be a little lower compared to what it was last year. So maybe with the Federal Reserve expected to do some rate cut, new nominee coming in, that maybe the mortgage rate will decline from what you see on the chart. And it happens. It just means the mortgage rate will be at the lowest point in 4 years. It's not going to go back to 3%, 4% mortgage rate. I don't think we will get to 5% mortgage rate. But 6% mortgage rate, after 4 years of 7%, 7.5%, 6.5%, 6% will sound pretty good. So as people have become accustomed to this 7%, 8%, 6% mortgage rate, or even 5.9% mortgage rate will look very good. So maybe this will be the trigger to really get the real estate market going. Next slide. So in the meantime, the Federal Reserve, as they are thinking about cutting interest rate to reduce some of the economic stress, inflation is not fully contained. Federal Reserve wants to see inflation at below the red line, but it's not fully contained. Next slide. And then we see some things are declining. So the blue is the gasoline prices right before the Iran situation. So we don't know what's going to happen to the blue, but the gasoline prices have been continually falling. But the red is utility bill. That has been rising. Next slide. But the rents are beginning to show no further growth, especially in the big cities like Charlotte, Atlanta, Nashville. There's so much apartment construction. You see a construction crane, you say, what are they building? Most likely they're building apartments. So because of so many new apartments coming into the market, rents are beginning to decline, and I think this will help on the inflation. But next slide, there are many moving parts. the home insurance costs are misbehaving. You are feeling it, and the data clearly shows that it is still rising. So how is the inflation going to behave over time given all this moving part? But overall inflation, the total inflation number is still not fully contained. Next slide. So these oil prices, one really wonder what's going to happen in the upcoming, and it's been fluctuating. Next slide. So one consequence of this inflation not being fully contained while the Federal Reserve is set to cut interest rate is that some people believe we may have permanently high inflation. Not a hyperinflation, but inflation that sort of lingers around. And if that's the case, you want to have an inflation hedge asset, and throughout human civilization, gold has served that. Gold prices have risen dramatically. That little gold necklace that your grandmother holds in their drawer, well, don't ever sell that at a pawn shop. Right now, pawn shop is like, bring your gold, we're gonna buy it. And they're gonna buy it not at this price, but slightly higher than what your grandmother paid for. But they're trying to take advantage of it. But people are turning towards gold as an inflation hedge, or maybe large budget deficit in many countries also contributing. But one thing about this chart is the following. I see in the social media, some people are saying, don't buy houses this year. Home prices have risen so much, it's bound to crash. Wait until home prices crash 30% before you buy. You see it in the social media. One quick way to counter-argue that point is this chart, because real estate has also served as an inflation hedge in the future. I'm not saying real estate prices will do like this, but at least at a time when gold prices are rising like this, there's no way real estate prices can crash 30%, 40%. So one quick counter argument to people who are saying, don't buy right now, prices will crash, one can show this chart. Next slide. Now let me turn to the job market. The job market is also beginning to soften. How many people are receiving paycheck? Right before COVID disruption, as the economy reopened, more job, such that we have now record high employment condition. President Trump, during his State of the Union, we have more Americans working today than ever before. So this is the chart. But where's the softness in the data, job market data that everyone is talking about? Let me put the same figure slightly differently. Rather than the total number of paychecks, next slide, how many new paychecks we are adding to the economy. And as you can see, we are barely adding anything. In fact, over the past 12 months, the number is close to zero. We are circling near zero. So we know we have high school graduates, we have college graduates, so we need to keep adding jobs. So if we're not adding jobs, then it is showing some economic stress condition. Now, one of the reasons as to why the job market is weak is purposeful. Next slide. Elon Musk came to Washington 1 year ago, and his job was to say, look, there's a lot of wasteful government spending out there, and I'm going to slash it away. And furthermore, Elon Musk has publicly stated that anytime government opens the money faucet, it attracts people who want to commit fraud. So if you want to reduce fraud, you have to slash away government spending, you have to reduce the money faucet that's coming out from Washington. So as you can see, it has fallen. I'm from the DC area, and I clearly see people who have are in this statistics. They have a job, now they don't have a job condition. How much of it is wasteful fact? How much of it is critical government service? Now, I hope the TSA people do not end up in this figure. I mean, they're still working even without getting paid, condition. But we hear from realtors in Atlanta that people working at the Center for Disease Control has been laid off, and even from people from Alabama, where they're saying some of the space program was initially cut before the money was then funded again. So, one wonders how much of it is bad, how much of it is critical government service. Next slide. So the job market is clearly weak. But then you look at the unemployment rate. The first in the middle is the Great Recession, foreclosure crisis, 10% unemployment. That sharp upward turn, that's COVID lockdown. All the hotels were closed, restaurants closed, sharp Today's unemployment rate is 4.4%. You go to economic textbook and you say 4.4% unemployment rate, that is not that bad. Essentially, in a free society where people have right to change job, companies have right to fire incompetent workers, it should not be 0% unemployment. There will always be some unemployment. It's 4.4%. And you say this is not bad. So how is it that we are not adding jobs but still have low unemployment rate? Is somebody trying to mess up with the data, twisting the data in a certain way? Well, one reason for this is because southern border has effectively shut down. Any job that's being added is person living in the country. It is not for people crossing the southern border, and that's why if there's a job opening, say in the construction industry, there could still be labor shortage because southern border is effectively shut down condition. Next slide. And in the meantime, among those people with job receiving salary, steady income salary. I know realtors, you are in commission income, so your income fluctuates a lot. The teachers, nurses, people on a steady income, their wages are rising a little faster than inflation, so their standard of living modestly improving. Next slide. So one thing that I will be monitoring going forward is, because again, southern border is shut down, whether or not the wage growth in the leisure and hospitality, that's in the hotel, that's in the restaurant, whether that begins to accelerate because of worker shortage, same thing in construction, or whether Americans go into this industry and therefore the wage rate will be very similar to the overall condition. Next slide. Good news for you. The states with current recession, orange color, Virginia, minus 0.3. Some people say in an election year, it is about the economy, or the phrase is the economy stupid, to say that don't worry about the social issues. You can debate social issues, but when people vote, it's really they are voting for the economy. Virginia, they switched parties, Republican governor to Democratic governor, because Virginia is in a recession. But look at North Carolina, South Carolina. They're the number one, number two in the country in terms of job addition. So very strong job creation condition. I know you have an open seat for the Senate race, which means that you're going to be bombarded with how terrible the other political candidate is. So you're going to be constantly bombarded this September, October time period. But the job market is very, very strong here. Next slide. I'd like to also look at long-term job growth, not only one-year time frame. And North Carolina and South Carolina, again, one of the top performers. Green color states are adding job at the strongest. Texas, 11% more job. North Carolina, 11% more job. Dark blue would be above national average. Light blue, adding job, but step slow. Little sluggish job creation. But congratulations, you're right on the border between South and North Carolina, so you're getting benefit of the both states doing very well in terms of job creation. Is home ownership the American dream? I think it is. I think most Americans who are not currently homeowners would like to be, but they just don't have the financial resources at the moment. But given that job numbers are so solid in Carolinas, you would say home sales should be at a record high today. But home sales are not at a record high because the conditions were not right. High mortgage rate of the recent years, and also lack of inventory in the immediate year following COVID situation. But if the conditions develop for the better, meaning that little lower mortgage rates, more inventory, maybe this job growth that has been happening here, this pent-up potential housing demand could be released onto the market. So view the job number as potential housing demand, and potential housing demand has been just very, very solid in the Carolinas. Next slide. And if we look at specifically at the Greater Charlotte, Concord, Gastonia region, look at these job numbers. Slight fluctuation, but compared to year 2000, when there was 900,000 people receiving paycheck, today it is 1.4 million. Traffic jam will get worse and worse. This is a byproduct of this strong job growth situation. So it's always the case. Infrastructure spending always lags behind what's happening on the needs of it, but the job growth has been just super strong. So this is all potential housing demand. Next slide. But if we look at the home sales are not at a record high. So the actual housing demand has been sluggish. The data begins from 2019, pre-COVID. Look at the first bar as a reference point. Then we had 2 years of frenzy from that low interest rate environment, multiple offers. Then when the Federal Reserve raised interest rate, mortgage rate went up to 8%, housing market tanked. And it's been on the slump for the past 3 years. Next slide. So if you look specifically at Gaston County, and Jenny and her team has put this data on their website, and you can browse even more, go to the MLS website. So what you see at least is that this area, at least in January, showing 12% increase in January sales, much, much better than the rest of the country. But this is still climbing out from the low point condition part. So not surprising, you have the job, so naturally you would outperform the national home sales statistics, and that is what's happening currently in Gaston County. Next slide. The number of luxury home sales has also been rising just because some homes that was $800,000, same address, same square footage, over time has become $1 million property condition. So some of that is just price movement, but it's also the case that at least up to last year, stock market at a record high that provide opportunity for the upper crust segment to buy property on the luxury end. Next slide. So home price growth, 70% price increase in the Carolinas from pre-COVID to today. You had a $300,000 home pre-COVID. Today, it will be worth $500,000. Doing quick math, that's $200,000 wealth gain by owning a property. How much did the renters get? Nothing. But owning clearly provided a return condition. So huge increase in prices condition. And I think next slide has what I wanted to say. Let me see. So we are at a record high real estate wealth consequently. And next slide, I don't remember. This shows probably one of the most powerful chart that the realtors can share with any potential buyer is the following. Just the data from the Federal Reserve. How much net worth do you have? Homeowners in blue, renters in red. And you see clearly the renters do not participate in wealth, but the homeowners participate in wealth. And certainly been the case here locally with a 70% price increase over the past 6 years. Next slide. Let me just go back to the prior one. Okay. Because the price increases have been so strong, the number one advocacy thing that we are pushing for is the following. The capital gains exemption. You sell a home, and if you're single, $250,000 exemption. If you're married, $500,000 exemption. That figure was sufficient for many, many years. You're a homeowner, you sell your home, and you don't have to pay a tax. That money is yours. And in fact, you can even say the spirit of that legislation, which was created, was that intent. Homeowners, that's your money, you keep it. But as we know, prices of everything has steadily risen. Home prices, especially since COVID, has risen dramatically. So more and more American homeowners are beginning to be ensnared in this capital gains tax. And some, especially elderly homeowners, maybe they have a large mansion, they want to downsize, maybe their spouse passed away, they don't need a large house. So they are considering maybe downsizing. This is the right thing to do. They want to get to the better home that fits their lifestyle. Well, their tax accountants are saying, don't do it. You're going to pay huge amount to the federal government. So many people, in a sense, are locked in because of the capital gains tax. We constantly talk about the lock-in mortgage rate impact. Yeah, there is some of that, but the lock-in capital gains tax, and more people from the Charlotte region will be moving up into this category. So number one issue that we will be relaying to the policymaker in Washington is essentially to say, lift the capital gains tax. It has not been changed for 30 years. And if it was hypothetically indexed to inflation, just like Social Security check is indexed to inflation, hypothetically, if it was indexed to inflation, today's exemption amount would be double the current amount. So single $500,000, married couple $1 million, so they can sell their property, the money is theirs, and there would not be hesitancy. So we are really pushing for that, and clearly in North Carolina, the new becoming more expensive market, which is also reason that the panel right behind me is trying to address how do you address the situation where teachers comes in, but they cannot buy a property. You want the teacher to be rooted in the community, but if they cannot buy property, what is the way to sort of incentivize or subsidize the ownership opportunity? So next slide. We have regular real estate wealth. Is it on a solid footing? Well, it is on a solid footing. First, remember the gold prices? Real estate prices cannot crash when the gold prices are rising that way. But maybe this is a better argument on this chart. Number of mortgage default and foreclosures, historically low. It has been rising lately, but if you read some of the articles recently to say foreclosure rates are rising, default rates are rising, you go to the footnote and that will say even with an increase, it is still below pre-COVID. That's my 2-minute warning sign. It is still below pre-COVID, which means that we don't have distressed property coming onto the market. If you don't have forced sales coming in massive way, home prices simply cannot crash conditions. So I think this graph is probably more economically sensible argument to say that prices will not crash. We just need to address how do we go get more supply so that teachers are able to have access to ownership, and also in the future, we don't have sudden big price spikes. It's good for the homeowners, but it really begins to divide the society. Renters feeling extremely frustrated, homeowners, the K-shaped economy, some people moving up, other people feel like they're moving down. Next slide. So I'm down to my final 2 slides. So this is the mortgage application to buy a property. It crashed in 2022 when Federal Reserve raised interest rates, crashed. Then it stayed low. But did you know that mortgage application to buy a home started to increase from about spring of last year? Home sales did not increase last year, but mortgage application to buy a home increased last year. How do you resolve those 2 differences? Because mortgage application does not mean mortgage approval. It includes mortgage denials. Someone who got denied at 7% mortgage rate, try again. Today at 6%, maybe they qualify. Furthermore, they got a little boost in their income, maybe 4% boost in their income. So try again, maybe there's a better chance. But at least what this chart shows is that the desire to enter the market has been rising over the past 12 months. Now the question is, can this desire to enter and buy translate into actual demand? Is much better chance this year compared to last year because mortgage rates are a little lower. And my next slide is my final chart. It's the forecast. Again, forecast, you could be wrong. And in fact, when I presented this forecast to some of the major real estate brokerage companies in America, in a meeting, I got a lot of resistance. I'm way too optimistic. They are saying, look at the number, 14%. There's no way possible. So what is my basis for this 14% increase in home sales? New home sales would depend upon the builders. So if you look towards the middle, I don't anticipate home price decline. But if you look in the middle, mortgage rate assumption is 6% this year, maybe even 5.9%. And when you do statistical analysis about how many people will qualify at a lower mortgage rate than before, you automatically get that 14%. So it's not just pulling the number out of the thin air. There's some little logic to it. I don't anticipate recession. I think there's a little backwind to the economy. Tax refund will be a little larger. There's some bonus depreciation for companies to expand. So I know the oil prices is a big uncertainty, but I don't really see a recession. But mortgage rate going to 6%. So I tried to explain this to large brokers who are very skeptical of my forecast. Then I decided to use another argument. And here's the another argument. Real estate is a cyclical business. And everyone knows that. Goes up, goes down. In terms of sales activity, prices can always keep going up for the most part as long as people stay within their budget. So home sales goes up and down. Everyone knows that. After a prolonged downturn, when it begins to recover, in the past history, it was quite normal to get a double-digit percentage gains. So to get a double-digit percentage gain recovery is very normal. It is not an abnormal thing. Furthermore, you have a record high number of jobs. In fact, 11% more job in North Carolina compared to pre-COVID condition. 11% more job. But you are not even close to the pre-COVID home sales. This 14% increase in sales is only a recovery. You need another 17% increase next year just to get back up to pre-COVID. So it's just a recovery year. So now that 14% does not sound that large, but again, we have to really wait and see where it develops. I know nationwide, January, we really did not get a boost. February, we got a small increase in February, so no meaningful 14% increase. But I think spring, summer, this is a key test moment. We don't have those snowy conditions, extreme cold, which I think even the Carolinas felt this winter period. So let's see what happens in spring, summertime, and whether we can get up to the 14%. But I hope I'm correct in my forecast. I'm trying to apply logic to it. And if I come somewhat close to overall forecast, you are looking at much improved business conditions for you, and best to you in this year in getting that extra business. So thank you very much.
We'll take some questions. Take some questions from the audience before we get to the panel. Anybody?
Steve?
Perfect.
Tell us who we are. It's Robert Goodling, Fifth Third Bank. Thank you for your speech today. With the new affordability seems to be the big buzzword with housing this year, and with the new restrictions of investors buying subdivisions at mass or builders building to rent, with those restrictions, how's that going to change the new sales and marketing for a new builder subdivision?
So another controversy President Trump has introduced is that right now, we know that in Washington, two political parties don't like to talk to each other. But did you know that the House of Representatives recently passed, I think it was 2 weeks ago, a bill called Housing for the 21st Century by a vote of 390 yes and 9 no. How do you get that type of bipartisan support? Well, this is all the work of the realtors and real estate community constantly mentioning how important real estate is to their community. And on the Senate side, led by Tim Scott, South Carolina Senator, and Elizabeth Warren, completely opposite end on their political spectrum, they are passing something similar to the House of Representatives on the bill to move it along. President Trump said, okay, I want to sign something, but I will not sign unless you put the limit on the institutional investors, preventing them from buying single home property and such, or they need to release some of those property over the years. So again, people are saying President Trump is interfering in a free market system, while others are saying, well, institutional investors, they are really taking advantage of the easier capital they can access, they can deduct their interest fully. Homeowners, theoretically, you could deduct mortgage interest rate, but in reality, many people don't need to take mortgage interest because you have larger standard deduction. So some people are saying there's a little financial unfairness that the institutional investors have, so maybe we should limit it. Anecdotally, we hear clearly, there's a home for sale, first-time buyer using FHA loan may want to make an offer, but before you know it, home is taken off the market or is already sold to an institutional investor. So it's very frustrating. Now for the home seller, you want to just sell it to the highest bidder, or easy transaction, cash transaction condition. But the voices, complaint that we hear is not from the sellers, we hear the complaint from the buyers, and I think this is going up to Washington, and consequently, President Trump wants to limit the institutional investors going in condition. I don't know all the details of how much limit or what flexibility there is for institutional investors buying single-family properties, or whether home builders can build single-family properties to rent it out or to sell it to the institutional investors, but that's one part that President Trump has said. Send me the housing bill, I want to sign it, but I will not sign if we allow institutional investors to keep doing what they have been doing. So we'll have to see how that plays out.
Additional questions for you?
Hi there, Ashley Hannah Murphy, eXp Realty. So affordability is definitely something that gets brought up a lot for people trying to buy homes. Something that we do see a lot of building is the multifamily, the condo units, especially in cities like Charlotte, Atlanta, things like that. Thoughts on maybe working with FHA to get more existing buildings on FHA approval list to help affordability for people looking to buy?
Yeah, very good question. It's something that our advocacy team is very aware of, and they are communicating what she is indicating as we are building so many multifamily units, and in fact, most are for apartments and not for condominium. At least condominium, there's opportunity for realtors to make sale, but unfortunately, it's mostly for apartments at the moment. And part of the reason is that condominium market has been underperforming compared to single family the past 2 years for the exact reason what she mentioned. First is property insurance bill has been rising, but many of the unit is not getting approved for FHA borrowing, and consequently, if you cannot get the FHA mortgage, sometimes that's the only first entry mortgage that people can obtain, then they cannot go into the condo market, so they're looking for single family, but single family is too expensive, so it's limiting that. So trying to get more existing multifamily unit that is still condominium to have the FHA loan accessibility that will, thank you for that remark. I think our advocacy team is one of those items is already on their radar to push for.
Hey, Dr. Yoon, thanks for being here. Greg Scott with Fifth Third Bank. I do have a question. So what about people like me that have very low interest rate? Bought 2015, my last house, 2.875. We're like, there are a lot of us on the sidelines that are looking to move in, but we don't want to get into that 6% rate. How is that impacting the home buying process and increase the amount of homes being sold every year? What does that impact do you see?
Today Americans are moving, meaning change of residence from one place to another at the slowest pace in U.S. history. This is not America. America wants dynamism. Dynamism means you bought a property, you trade up, you trade up, you trade up, and maybe in retirement you trade down, but constant movement is implying dynamism. Americans are in a sense stuck, but people who have low interest rate, they're saying, I'm happy being stuck because I have 2.75% condition, but then you ask the question, what about the next home, hypothetically, with the same interest rate? Oh, then my life would improve going to the next residence with the same interest rate. So in a sense, we do have a lock-in effect that forces people to be stuck. Now steadily, the lock-in effect will become less strong just for the simple fact that every year we have people with major life-changing events, death in the family, marriages, divorces, having additional child in the family, meaning that initial starter home is simply too small. You have to give up the low interest rate and move to the next home condition. So we know that the lock-in effect will lose its strength over time, but then we still have sizable number who are just fine. I'm gonna stay here as long as I can. Is there a way to do it? Some people talk about portable mortgages. Portable mortgages is essentially you are carrying the same interest rate to the next home condition, but then that sort of violates all these current mortgage term that was already signed, and that makes it a little difficult. And so I think people are looking at many angles of it. In fact, I think President Trump, because we speak with members of Congress constantly, NAR is probably the most bipartisan organization in terms of donating money, PAC money, Political Action Committee money, roughly half the money to Democrats, half the money to Republicans. And then we talk with the people in the White House, because anybody with power, we want to have a communication line. So in the White House, they constantly relay what are some ideas. So portable mortgages has been passed around, and they said, well, it could be a little complicated. In fact, it may actually raise mortgage rate because it would violate some of the terms of condition. But I think whether it is just a passage of time that immediately sort of lessens that, but lower mortgage rate will help unlock some of those locking effects. So 2.75, 8%, no way you're going to trade that away. 2.75, mortgage rate going just 5.5, then you say, well, it's not ideal, but maybe it's something I would do. So at least falling mortgage rate will help. And I'm glad that the banking industry was also invited. One thing that I did not cover is that there is an extra incentive for the Federal Reserve to cut interest rate, which is that commercial real estate mortgage loans are not performing well. And much of the commercial real estate mortgages are held by not big banks, not the Bank of America, not the JP Morgan, but by your local banks. So they're holding on to those banks. Some local banks are doing very fine, but then we have 10,000 local banks, and some maybe not so fine, but only way to relieve that pressure is to cut interest rate. So there is an extra motivation to cut interest rate because we don't want to have any kind of banking crisis, especially among the small size banks.
Got time for one more question in the audience. One. Thank you, Dr. Yin.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Dr. Yin, thank you so much for your insights. It's an incredibly complicated issue when we talk about interest rates and people locked in at low rates and the cost of housing, cost of land, growth, and Gaston County is not immune to any of those issues. And so what we'd like to do now, which is typical of GBA events, is we want to get that big picture that Dr. Hume laid out for us, and then we're going to take a look at, so what does that mean to us locally? And this really isn't to go deeper into the housing issue specifically, but really to touch on what Dr. Hume highlighted in some of the slides just around growth, and the fact that North Carolina is in the top 5 in many of those slides of growth, percentage growth, jobs, employment. Well, we're certainly seeing that here in the Charlotte region. And so there are impacts to that growth beyond just housing, although that's a critical one. We all know that traffic is a challenge. We know that infrastructure, as Dr. Yee said, typically follows growth, which is unfortunate, but the water and sewer capacity that we have here continues to lag the dramatic growth. And then schools are impacted. And so we wanted to bring experts in those 3 areas to talk about the impacts and what we're doing locally about that. So I'd like to ask our panel participants to come on up. So we have Stephanie Scheringer, who's Assistant Director of Public Utilities at Two Rivers, our local utility operation at Gastonia. Also, Dr. Morgan Bouchard, who's the Superintendent of Schools, and Randy Gates, who's the Director of Transportation for City of Gastonia. So if you all will take these 3, there's a mic, you'll need to turn that on if you want people to hear you. I told them all this is not a gotcha session. We're not going to ask why are there challenges, why don't you fix it today? And then I want to emphasize, because the GBA is really going deep in all these situations, these challenges. These are incredibly complex, and they're interrelated, and you can even throw in politics, we're not gonna talk about tax structures here or revenue structures, how to fund things, but if you think about the challenge at the federal level on money, with a huge deficit, I don't know, it's probably 38 trillion today, maybe even higher. And so that's the debt that we're holding. We continue to have deficit challenges in each annual budget. The state's challenged with transportation funding, local communities challenged. And so we get that. Right? What we want to do is drive further. And so what do? That's the reality. But the other reality is we're impacted negatively in our quality of life. What can we do about that? So today is a session to just better understand these issues, and then hopefully you leave here with some ideas of how we collectively can come together as a business community to help move us forward. So with that said, let's get rolling. And I have just a couple opening questions for you, and then we'll see where this goes. So let's start with Dr. Bouchard. So on the surface, it would appear that this rapid growth would have a dramatic impact in schools. And you and I have talked about this, that the dynamics might be a little different today than they were even 10 years ago. But just how do you, your team, the school board, begin to assess from a strategic standpoint what these growth impacts are to how you operate the school system locally?
Sure. Well, morning.
You're not on. You're not on.
How about that?
No.
Well, good morning. Thank you for having me here this morning, and thank you all for supporting Gadsden County Public Schools. We are the future. So, major projects and initiatives we are taking and have taken the last 5 or 6 years is it's a threefold approach. When we build schools, right, and you all know if you've been down Garrison Boulevard, we have a beautiful new school there, GAR Middle School. What we do is we replace an older school, that was I think built in the 30s, late 30s, with a modern building that can house more students. So we took down an older 700 capacity school building and built the new Greer with a capacity of 1,000, the ability to expand to 1,200. So the last 3 building projects we've done, we are trying to prepare for the future and a growing population. We have undertaken a large demographic study, and I'll talk about that more later in the day, but we really need to understand our capacities in our buildings. We need to understand what growth is coming, and very importantly, where it's coming. That matters in schools. We are looking into not only land banking, but understanding the land and the grounds that we have. We operate almost 5.5 million square feet under roof, and that comes with a lot of property and land around it. So where can we add to schools? Where can we do 2-phase approaches and build new schools while the existing school operates? So that's kind of where we are with projects and initiatives, and then always looking at our facilities. How can we upgrade our facilities and potentially add to them? That's kind of our approach to projects and initiatives.
So Stephanie, you oversee an interesting component of infrastructure that most people don't ever see it. Right? And when they do see it, it's not good because a pipe is broken or there's just too much capacity on the system. And as we've seen regionally and even locally, there's been some moratoriums on development because just the new development can't be serviced. So that's a tough job to prepare for that. And I think it'd be helpful for the audience to understand just the Two Rivers operation and maybe a little bit of quick history just in Gaston County, why we are where we are today with the kind of fractured approach to the utilities. And then how do you prepare for the future when the future comes at a rapid pace here?
Let's see if this day does work. Good morning. Thank you for having us today. With respect to strategic planning, we're really doing strategic extensions of the water sewer infrastructure, most notably in the southeast area of the county. So phase 1 of expansion into the southeast area has been completed. phase 2 is under construction now. That'll wrap up in the next few months. That total infrastructure, investment in that area is about $59 million. So obviously a lot of zeros involved in all of these water and sewer needs. Additionally, with respect to planning and so forth, we have studied the southwest area of the county. We've also studied the southern area of the county all the way down to the South Carolina border, to determine, when the time comes, how do we best serve those areas with water and sewer. So I think those are the key components to that strategic planning.
My understanding of the water capacity is that historically, due to the textile industry, there was a lot of water capacity, but you have to do something with water on the back end to treat it, and then there's the sewer component. So help us with just where are we capacity-wise with some of these services, and again, how that links with your strategy on growth.
Sure, so we're actually in a really good position respective to capacity of water. So Two Rivers gets its water from Mountain Island Lake. It's a very clean source, it's a great source of water. And the foresight of our predecessors is really, really key here. So back in the 1980s, the folks that were involved at the time secured a permit to withdraw up to 75 million gallons per day from Mountain Island Lake. So that's really the key component. If we don't have the water, the source water to pull in, really, nothing else can happen from there. So, they really had that foresight, and they really could not have made a wiser decision at that time. We have one water treatment plant. It's capable of treating 27.3 million gallons a day, and right now we're at about 55% capacity. So at the water plant, we have capacity now to serve growth up to that 27 million, and then when the time comes, we need to look at either expanding that water treatment plant, possibly constructing additional water treatment plant, but we have, 75 million gallons total that we can withdraw from Mountain Island. Looking on the sewer side, we have 3 wastewater treatment plants. The total combined capacity there is 26 million gallons a day. Each of those 3 plants serves a different geographic area of the region. And, mentioning the textiles, we all know Gaston County was built on textiles. And the textiles used a huge amount of water and wastewater to create their products. So in the 1990s, we expanded one of the treatment plants and upgraded it. We doubled the capacity of that wastewater treatment plant. And then shortly thereafter, we had the North American Free Trade Agreement. So with the exodus of the textiles, the silver lining there is that opened up a huge amount of capacity, particularly at our wastewater treatment plants. So there's a couple key things there. There were a lot of wastewater treatment plants historically in the county, in different communities. So that freed up capacity has allowed us to complete projects with our partners, with other municipalities who had aging wastewater treatment plants that were really at the end of their useful life. It allowed us to decommission those plants and reroute that wastewater over to one of the Two Rivers facilities, kind of centralizing a lot of the wastewater treatment. And that has saved millions and millions of dollars. Wastewater treatment plants are extremely costly to build and to operate, so that's been a positive. And then moving forward, we still have plenty of capacity for the growth. Specifically related to the southeast area, one of the initiatives that we're working on now is beginning to look at a potential phase 3 of expansion into the southeast. And as part of that planning effort, we're looking at the wastewater treatment plant that serves that area. It has capacity for growth at this time, but it will need to be expanded. So the planning periods that we look at in water and sewer are very long. It takes a very, very long time to get these things done. So, we're starting to look at that now and prepare for that need that we know is coming.
Thank you, it's very helpful. Hello, Randy. Transportation. So Gastonia's done some really creative things recently with the Go Gastonia. Transportation transportation solution, did away with the fixed route bus. We have the on-call transportation opportunity for people. You all drove a $75 million bond campaign to improve roads, improve intersections. So help us understand how you go about planning for transportation needs in this community. I know you just Gastonia, but you can speak largely to that.
Thank you. So I think one of the biggest things that we do, and I believe we do really well for having so many communities within Gaston County. I see a lot of my friends here today. We work very closely together, the communities do, working directly with the Gaston Cleveland Lincoln Metropolitan Planning Organization, the GCL-MPO. We use a lot of acronyms in transportation, but one of the things we work really closely to identify priority projects that may not necessarily have the greatest, we're not thinking about the greatest impact to this particular neighborhood. What we have to do is think countywide and in the region of what projects are gonna be best for all those that live within our communities and travel, through the county as well. So regional coordination is key. We work very closely with the North Carolina Department of Transportation, NCDOT, our division offices are over in Shelby. Work very closely with them to identify projects and then also working through the implementation phase of big infrastructure projects. So when we're thinking about strain on transportation when it comes to highways, I will say it's gonna get worse before it gets better. But we have a lot of federal dollars that are gonna be coming to Gaston County within and over the next 5-10 years. Projects that we've needed for a long time, 10+ years, it's all gonna be coming at once. So I think the federal dollars that are coming in for highway projects, I think it's reaching $2 billion over the next 10 years for just Gaston County projects. So identifying the projects, working with NCDOT to implement the projects is key. And then also thinking through what future projects are gonna be needed. And so one thing that the general obligation bonds did for the city of Gastonia is it's allowing us to do planning work and engineering and design work to really get projects ready, shovel ready for the next round of funding, whether that's through grants or through NCDOT prioritization. It just allows us to identify the project needs and then have projects ready to move forward the next time. So, we're also working on, as Pat mentioned, with our Go Gastonia, our micro-transit, so we're thinking through mobility on the public transportation side of things. Also constantly looking at other modes of mobility with bicycle and pedestrian accommodations, with highway projects and standalone. It has to be more than adding lanes to highways. It has to be an approach that we're looking at all modes of transportation to make it work.
I think that last point really touches on a comment by Dr. Yoon that I believe is true, that we're not going to have less congestion in the future. And so we all have to have a realistic expectation of traffic and delays. And what Randy's talking about is how do we help mitigate that increased traffic that's coming. So there are solutions with multimodal approaches which are critical to an urbanizing environment. But we humans like to think the world started when we showed up, whenever that was and wherever that is. And we want things to stay just the way they were when we moved to wherever we moved. It doesn't work that way in a growing environment like this. And so one thing, and Randy touched on this a little bit, just funding. Help us understand from the schools, utilities, transportation, how are these projects funded? Because we're talking hundreds of millions to billions of dollars. And nobody seems to have any money, yet we all want somebody else to pay for this stuff. I think it'd be helpful to have a grounding in what are the sources today that support these efforts. So Randy, we'll start with you.
So the majority of the big transportation highway projects that you're gonna see under construction, and I'll kind of rattle those off real quick. I-85 widening, improvements to US 74 Wilkinson Boulevard, Franklin Boulevard, South New Hope Road widening, Union Road widening, I can go on, there's a list of funded projects, again, over the next 5 to 10 years. Funding is hard to get for transportation projects through NCDOT prioritization process. And again, we've been really lucky, but these are projects that have been in the works for 10 plus years. There are way more priorities than what can be funded through the transportation dollars at the state. And that's federal dollars flowing through the state to come to the local communities. So it's very frustrating, I will say at times, and I've questioned it a number of times with NCDOT is, you know, why can't, it's so hard to get out ahead of growth when it comes to transportation, and it's because of the limited dollars and all of the priorities. And so we work very hard to identify projects that we feel are gonna score well for funding. But the way the scoring system works with prioritization and NCDOT, it's looking at the current traffic, the current daily traffic counts. It's not looking at, you know, what we know is gonna be developed and what's been approved in developments. It's the right now. What are the issues right now? And again, I've been frustrated by that, but the response I've gotten from DOT and federal is there's not enough money to take care of the problems that we have now, much less try to fix future problems that, yes, we all know are gonna happen, but what if there's another recession and we've put millions of dollars into a road and then it doesn't connect to anything, or the development that was approved isn't gonna happen. So we have to focus on the issues right now. It is frustrating, I will say. But I think that there needs to be some more work at the state level, and I think they are working on it to identify how we get our transportation dollars through the gas tax and some other things. So they're having a number of conversations of how to make the pot bigger of funding to help spread. And that's why Gastonia did what we did with the GO bonds, the general obligation transportation bonds. That was $75 million bonds for transportation that was approved by like 74% of the voters back in 2022. It's local government saying, okay, we've got all these needs. There's not enough federal funding to do these things. Like, we have to take the reins locally and make some things happen. So I urge other communities to talk to the city of Gastonia and how we were able to do that, looking at those local ways that you can get some transportation projects underway. It is local. It is paid for. It's bond money loans that's then paid for with local dollars.
Yeah, so when we talk about schools, we build schools through bond referendums and local dollars as well. And in 2017, we have a very supportive local elected officials, and as well as a county, overwhelmingly voted to approve school bonds in 2017. And if you remember, that was in the amount of $250 million, which we have just received the last draw of that, and the last 3 schools you see built, I know Stanley, Belmont, and Greer were from those funds. So that's how we build schools. Also, bond dollars help us continue to upkeep for roofs, think paving, the HVAC, additions. You're gonna see some additions coming up soon in our schools. So it is through local dollars, voted on by, through bond dollars. Bond referendum. Well, it is the obligation of schools for the local government to take care of operating and maintaining schools. So we have 3 funding sources, basically federal, state, and local. And on the federal side, you think of the title programs, entitlement, think along the lines of exceptional children, academically gifted, school nutrition, and then on the state level, generally is for educators in the classroom, so think positions, think teachers, support staff, and then locally, the responsibility is to maintain our buildings, both from, starts with custodians, to our HVAC techs, to replacement of capital goods. That does fall on local. And again, we have been very fortunate in Gaston County that the support has been overwhelming to maintain, build, and upfit our schools. Through that, $250 million is not a low number for voters in a bond referendum. So hopefully we have another one coming up in another 2 years, because we have done well with it.
Also, bonds are used for some water and sewer projects. Obviously, rates are important in that conversation. One thing I think that sometimes some folks in our community maybe don't understand is that tax dollars don't go towards water and sewer needs. It's an enterprise fund. It has to be self-supporting. We've also gotten grants. We've gotten a good bit of grants for some of the rehabilitation and those types of projects that we need to do. We all know that developers have put in, water and sewer infrastructure within neighborhoods and so forth that are being built, and then that infrastructure is conveyed over to Two Rivers to operate and maintain from that point forward. But I think one of the more unique things that we've been successful with in this area is partnerships. So right now, Gaston County, for example, has a project installing a water line out in the Chapel Grove area. It's going to serve the school out there. It's also going to be the backbone for some additional residential development that's coming in that area. So we're very fortunate that we have those partnerships, and those go back 40, 50 years. We've been doing this for a really, really long time. Another example of partnerships would be what I mentioned with the decommissioning of some of those wastewater treatment plants. If we take, say, Hot Shoals, for example, they used to have 2 small wastewater treatment plants. Those were taken offline a number of years ago, and that sewer flow is conveyed down to Two Rivers. But right now, Hot Shoals is seeing some growth, so the county is participating in that project as well, spending some ARPA dollars to expand that sewer infrastructure, and Two Rivers is participating in that to upsize some of that infrastructure for additional anticipated growth. So I really think that's one of our strengths in the county, is that any of us in the water and sewer business, and even the county who's not in the water and sewer business, can get together in a room, we can figure it out, and at the end of the day, we can get those things done. One project that comes to mind that's interesting from that perspective, it took 12 years for this particular project. The group got together in a room and said, hey, how can we solve this? What can we do? It took 12 years until that project was fully completed and constructed. So I think that really speaks to the commitment that we have, and that will be part of that solid base moving forward.
Yeah, so the reason I asked the question is just so everybody could understand the nuances and complexities of financing these large infrastructure projects in schools. And I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that Representative Loftus is here in the state. The state is a big player in supporting these initiatives locally, and initiatives that are managed well and strategically are the ones that are going to get funding. And so you hear that we have tremendous leadership in this community around these complicated challenges, and that bodes well for receiving federal money and state money. But ultimately, there's going to have to continue to be a component locally. And when we say local money, typically it's property taxes or fees in an enterprise operation like utilities. And we're going to continue to look at prioritization as the GBA, the Business Voice of Business, and bring all of you into the conversation to really bring the business emphasis on need of not just, we need all roads fixed. That's not going to happen. But what is the priority? What's the case we can build for these particular projects? And how can we be creative in a way to fund those? Because the days, in my opinion, are gone when we can just say, well, that's expensive and we don't have money. Well, that doesn't solve it for us. So we're going to have to continue to look at what's being done around the country and how to solve these problems. So I'd like to now open it up to the audience for questions for our panelists. I told them this was not a gotcha session, so be kind.
Good morning, Teresa McFarlane. I'm the owner of Rock and Realty Inc., and I'm also a 30-year parent advocate for special needs kids. Dr. Hushar, what is Gaston County Schools currently doing with our bullying situation? And also, do we have cameras in the classrooms? And if we don't, is that something that can be discussed?
Okay, well, sure, I welcome the questions. I thought this was a housing outlook breakfast, but I'll certainly answer that. So, listen, we every day try to educate our children in the classroom and our schools about the negative effects of bullying, and it shouldn't go on. We have bullying programs, anti-bullying programs to support that. So it's a work in progress, and we like to partner with our families at home to say this is something that needs to start in the home and we enhance in our schools. So we have an ongoing through our social workers, our school counselors, ongoing curriculum on identifying what bullying is and the harms and effects that it can have. We do not have cameras in our classrooms, but we do have them throughout our school.
Additional questions? Randy, when does traffic start on I-85 with some cameras? That's my question here.
So I think we'll probably start seeing construction, dirt moving on the first phase of the 95 widening project from exit 26, Belmont, over to McAdenville, maybe even within the next 6 to 8 months.
Thanks.
My name is Greg Gills. I'm a utility contractor, and this is more of a statement. So we work for municipalities all over North South Carolina. Two Rivers is exceptional how they do work and planning. Just, we don't always give them enough credit for what they do, but I've seen them much, much worse. I've seen Stanley before it was part of Two Rivers when they were down to a 10 horsepower pump dying. It was the water source of the town. So Stephanie, you've always done a good job. Just wanted to make that statement.
Thank you, Greg, we appreciate that. If I may respond to that, I think, I think it's been mentioned, we don't see the water and sewer infrastructure. We turn the tap on, we flush the toilet, we expect for things to happen. It is something that it can be difficult for the public to understand and difficult for, why does it cost this much? I mentioned the Southeast infrastructure that has been installed and we spent about $59 million on that. But $59 million, what that gets you in today's economy is about 3 miles of water line, about 7 or so miles of sewer line, and 2 sewer pump stations. Now, these are big lines. These are not small lines like you would see in a neighborhood. These are large transmission type lines. But I think your average person maybe that doesn't work with water and sewer, that doesn't have that familiarity, might look at that and say, $59 million is crazy. How could you spend that much money? But that's what it costs in today's society. And Greg is familiar with that. He's done some jobs for us. So wanted to share that as well. Thanks.
Please introduce yourself and if you're new to the community.
This was for Randy. I'm Terry Shook. I grew up in Gastonia and now practice architecture over in Charlotte. But Randy, I know you have the Reconnecting America grant coming up this year, and I'm just curious what your opinion is, and therefore as a spokesperson for the city, about the promise of that grant for growth, particularly as it impacts housing, but also other elements of building a community.
So the city of Gastonia has received a $2 million Reconnecting Communities pilot grant, RCP, again, acronyms, we like those, with a $500,000 local match. So $2.5 million that's gonna go to complete a feasibility study to cap the railroad ditch through downtown, as well as an overall connectivity study. So what that could look like, as far as development, there's, every potential. We don't have any preconceived concepts of what that could look like. We need to know, is it feasible to cap the railroad ditch? And then what could we develop on that? Could it only be parks? Could it be commercial? Could it be residential? Like Center City Crossings type multi-level development in the downtown area, and what that could bring for additional businesses in the downtown. So it's really exciting to think what that could be for the city to expand the whole downtown area of the city. And so we are looking to get started. We're in the process of getting our agreement with the Federal Highway Administration ready. That actually goes to council at the next council meeting. So hopefully we'll be starting on that within the next 4 months or so once we get someone on board. So exciting things for Gastonia and what that could be as far as new development in the downtown area.
Time for a few more.
Jessica Pendergraft, I'm a realtor here in Gaston County. Randy, my question's for you. You're brave for being here. I know this was a lot. So, South New Hope. So, in putting, I live in the area too, so it's not just South New Hope. I know that's the obvious clog, but the traffic is now filtering into other areas to try to get out. So, it's becoming a gridlock. Obviously, I hear what you say about the communities coming up on South New Hope. You can't plan for them because if they don't come to fruition, then you put a lot of money into it. However, we do already have a lot of charter schools, Christian schools, public schools. I mean, there's a ton right there, and they're adding that little subject, that little complex. I don't know what that's going to be, but so my question is, in housing families and people looking, they already know that's a mess. So, it's kind of deterring them from coming there. From the school district standpoint, are they going to have, capabilities to house for my students? And then I don't want to add an extra 30 minutes in commute to my job. So my question is, what can the community do that's already there to kind of push that, to kind of get us, to move us up as far as, what can we do as a community? And then what is the time frame on that in relation to the other projects that you mentioned?
So the South New Hope Road widening project is a funded project to widen to a 4-lane divided facility from Tittman Road, where Piedmont Charter School is, all the way down to Union New Hope, where the volunteer fire department is. Widening the 4-lane divided, it will have 10-foot multi-use paths on both sides. So right-of-way acquisition is currently underway, and construction is expected to start in 2028. I think it's going to be, construction will be let, I want to say I saw a date of August of 2027, but probably won't see any dirt moving for a little, a few months after the project is let for construction. So we're looking at a 3 to 4 year construction timeline for that. It's not going to be pleasant. I drive that road every day too. That's part of my commute. So it's going to be difficult. It's much needed. 4-lane divided, so it's going to control some access points that will help with the traffic flow once the project is complete. So project is really underway with right-of-way acquisition. Utility relocation will come after that. So not much that the community can do to push that project along because it's already underway. Things are happening, you're just not seeing it so much, but design is ready, right-of-way is underway, and utility relocation will be next.
Tammy Parker Realty. I have a question for the schools. What capacity, what percentage of the schools are at max capacity?
Okay, that's a great question. It's one we look at often, and I do want to note, where there's a need for roads and there's a need for water and sewer, there's also a need for schools, right? So we are in an ongoing demographic study with a leading firm that does a lot of county around here. And one of the things we look at is the capacity of our schools. And one of the issues we have is we have a growing capacity in pockets where we need the roads, where we need the sewer and water. So those are the schools we are looking at. know, my demographic study, and I'm glad I'm able to talk about this real quick, the student population, that's what I look at, is not tracking with the adult population, okay? So we see a lot of dirt being turned, and we see a lot of houses going on, and we see the population of adults increasing, but children are lagging behind, according to demographic study. Now, remember now, there's 3 pages of what can change that with asterisks, and it's just a study. But where we are growing, to your point, I think that's your question, is in certain pockets in our community. And so I asked, why is the student population not growing with the adult? Well, look around the room. How many of you in here live here, but your kids have graduated from school and are on? And you stay here because it's a good place to live. It's a good location. It's a good community. You feel safe. So a lot of the adults, like myself, whose children are now gone, not me. And then this younger generation is not having children at a rate like you all did if you're my age, 50 or above. You have to have 2.1 children to replace, and I think Gaston County right now is at 1.2 or 1.3. So we're relying on what's called migration, not immigration, but migration in from folks who are moving to the area for jobs, etc. So to get to your point, you will see classroom additions added on to schools where, for example, the Southeast, we know that area is growing. Our demographer said we need to make sure we pay attention to the Dallas area because we know that the corridor there with the 321 and 85 is growing. And there are other pockets that we're looking at. So when we replace a school, we make them larger. Belmont Middle School, for example, I could seat another 300 children there if I needed to because we built it with the future in mind. And that can look different as well. So at capacity, we have about 5 schools that we consider at capacity. Our overall capacity for the school system is going to be around 89%, 88, 89%. But I'm saying we have a 10% we can look at and adjust as needed. I hope that answered your question. Long way around to get to it. Yeah, that's a good point. So, you know, the Gaston County Schools consolidated 56 years ago. But before that, every community had their schools and their community schools, right? That's why we have 56 schools in Gaston County with 30,000 students. So when you compare us to, let's say, Union or Cabarrus, we have more schools than other counties that are like us. Because when we were building schools, they were cow pastures, right? The development hadn't started there yet. So I find myself in our Board of Education working towards how do we help that footprint and how do we change the narrative of Gaston County schools, small community schools? It's one of the reasons why I moved to Gaston County. When Jeff asked me here 10, 12 years ago, this got a small community feel, and those community schools are what kind of help drive that feeling. But when times are tough, that makes it harder to operate that many schools. So yeah.
Great. We got time for 1 or 2 more. Rosalind Crawford with Premier South. I have a question. I have 2 adult children who one has graduated from college, one is in college, and my husband and I have a teenager. However, the graduate from college, I'm hearing the jobs, but where are they? The graduate from college couldn't come back to this area because there are no jobs that she can, afford to live and pay rent and do what she needs to do, save money to possibly buy a house one day. Where are the jobs? I hear, and I don't know if anybody up here can answer that question, but I hear about the job growth, about North Carolina having the highest job growth. Where are they? Because right now my kids are in the Raleigh-Durham area, and they may have to stay there because that seems to be possibly where the job growth is. So can you answer that question?
Well, I can tell you, I'll hire your children right now to teach Gaston County schools.
Actually, we want to hire them too in utilities. A lot of the folks that work in utilities have been in the business for a very, very long time. Like I'm coming up on 30 years in utilities. So we are going to be seeing folks exit and retire and so forth. And we need folks coming along. So in utilities, it's not the most glamorous sometimes. But we definitely need people in utilities. We have positions advertised currently, and the time. So we welcome them along with the school system.
And I would say generally, so it's industry specific. So if your child who just graduated is a neurosurgeon, that's a little different than somebody that's an accountant. But the accountant is probably struggling because of this thing called AI. And we don't know how that's going to impact really that starter level job opportunity. You can read a lot about that. It's guesswork today, but those are some of the jobs that are most challenging as people who are recent graduates, and I'm hearing that a good bit. And that's a struggle. However, Stephanie's point is absolutely right. You look at all facets of jobs, people are going to be aging out. So if that job is still necessary, there will be opportunity, but we're just in this transition phase of trying to determine how to identify the need in a business. You have business owners that are wondering, should we hire somebody full-time, or can we just cover that with technology advancements? And it's tough. I mean, it's not a great answer, but that's everything that I'm reading is we're in this period of uncertainty, especially in that starter job category.
Anyone else hiring here that wants to share? I know Michael's got a whole bunch of jobs, and Greg, this guy is always doing something. Anything else? One more question? Okay.
All right, well, thank you to the panelists. Please, and this wraps up today's session. A future session we will have, now I forget the date, coming up in the next couple months, will be more on this topic of development. So we're toying with the idea of bringing in folks from around the Charlotte region that have dealt with these growth challenges, and we can learn from them and how we might be able to take some of their things that didn't work out well and do it differently and better here. But I just want to go back to one of the earlier comments I had, that there's no simple answer to this stuff. It's complicated. We all need to be in it together, and we all need to be really open to the realities that we're facing. But there's a lot of emotion around schools and growth and traffic, and I get that. Our job in the business community is to try to go under the radar of the emotion and really find solutions that can prepare this community for the future. And I think that's really what our jobs are, collectively. It's not for us. So where do we want to be in 20 years? We can get some agreement on that. We can back into what are some solutions to get there. So thank you for joining us. I hope you have a great rest of your day.